It will. We'll get there. It just summarizes. But it just summarizes basically my whole experience while we were there, and it was at Dart Container. So I did a summer internship at Dart Container. I was there for 16 weeks. Basically, Dart Container makes disposable food containers. So like cups, those little takeaway things that you put your food in after you leave a restaurant, silverware, straws, like anything like that. So they make all that. They were founded in 1960 by the Dart family. They're still owned privately by them. So it's still in the family and everything. They actually purchased the Solo Cup company. And they still leave the name on everything because everyone recognizes the name Solo. But they bought that in 2012 for $1 billion. They have 15,000 employees worldwide, actually. And there's 31 manufacturing and distribution centers in 14 different states. And there's also 9 facilities in 5 different international locations. So we have places in Canada and in the UK and Europe and Mexico and Argentina and Brazil. So while I was there as an intern, I worked on a team with actually a graduate from Spring Arbor in actuarial science. His name is Chad. And I worked with thermoformed lids, which is just a lid that's made in a specific way. And I also worked with plastic plates. So while I was there, I learned a lot of general experience of the business world. I've never worked in an office setting or anything similar to that. It was a nice gradual push into the business world because they have no dress code, which is great. So I don't have to dress really nicely or anything. And while we're there, while we're planning and doing all the work with the products, we use a program called SAP. I think it stands for something in German. I'm not really sure. But it has SAP and then there's also SNP. And both of them are just used to be able to view all the different products. You can view what's happening with them, where they are, how much inventory there is. Basically anything you need to know about a certain product you can find on here. And I also learned the difference between our live plants and our non-live plants. As of a couple months ago, they're actually all live now. The difference was some of them had info in a different application instead of SAP. They're all the plants that we gained from Solo Cup Company when they were bought. So I was working with a non-live plant in Ada, so that I learned a little bit differently than what I'm doing right now. I learned a lot of Excel skills. I can say nothing I ever did in college prepared me for the Excel stuff I do at work right now, but I learned that pretty quickly. It was, so if you're gonna get a job here or somewhere near, maybe work with Excel a little bit. It's great. I utilized a lot of different resources, so basically they give you a job and they give you like 6 different things, and they're like, here, use all of this and find me this info. So you have to be able to compile all different sorts of information. You have to be able to do informed decision making using all that. A lot of problem solving. There's a lot of communication skills. I was not very good at that. I still am not, but the internship helped. And then it also just pushed me out of my comfort zone. I was put in charge of a lot of things I did not think I was qualified to be in charge of, but it all went okay. While I was there, they have classes down in their basement, which sounds sketchy, but it's not. They have all these different classes, such as the 4 that I have listed there, and there's a lot more. Those are the 4 core classes. Everybody is required to take those classes, and depending on who your manager is, they might require you to take them every, 4 years or so. It depends on who's in charge of you. And they have a lot of other classes that you can take optionally, and you get paid while you take them. They're maybe like 2 hours long each, kind of depends on the class. So I went through the 4 core classes, and I know I'm probably going to be getting signed up for some other ones. And I also did a lot of cross-training. I sat with someone from deployment, I sat with someone from forecasting, and I sat with someone else from customer service. And we just kind of went through and compared our jobs and found places where they're similar, places where they're different, and just kind of saw how one of them affects the other. And I thought that was really interesting because I really didn't know how those jobs worked or how they related to production planning. So while I was there, I took a visit to one of the Chicago plants that we have. We drove down there on June 22. We took a tour of the plant. I got to see the production lines for the first time, which was interesting because I've never worked in any sort of production plant or manufacturing situation or anything. So I wasn't I didn't know what to expect. So it was really interesting to go see where the things that I planned were produced. I got to meet a lot of the people who worked at the plant, which was cool because you talk to these people on the phone or over Skype or whatever, but you don't know what they look like. You never meet them unless you go visit. We sat and we had some discussions. This is one of the plants that was in the process of going live, so we talked about that. And then whenever you go out to visit a plant, you get free food. So we went to Portillo's and got some free food. It was pretty great. A little while later, on August 20, we went to Ada. Ada is the plant that I was planning for. It's over in Oklahoma. And we took the privately owned DART plane. We flew out there. It's pretty awesome. They give you like bagels and breakfast food on the plane. They have the hangar stocked with candy. They get you free food when you're down there. It's pretty awesome. But we took a tour of the plant there too. I met all the people that I had been working with throughout the summer. And we got catered pizza while we were there. Again, saw some more of the production lines. Like, it was a good experience. And then I had some internship projects, and these are the main things I was working on while I was an intern. I was mostly in charge of updating capacity models, and that is still actually what I'm doing as a full-time worker. Basically, they have a sheet for every product line, so say the thermoformed lids or the plastic plates or the trophy cups or whatever. And it has all the products on there, and it tells you this is how much you can make and this is how much you are making. So based on that, you can have this much capacity left. It's just so that we don't tell a customer like, yeah, we can make this for you, and then find out later that we can't. So I was in charge of updating those, making them more accurate, making them more user-friendly, and making them easier to update month to month so that there was less work involved and that it would be a quicker process. So I've learned a lot about that. I had to talk to every single plant and get information on the mold bases, which is basically just the parts of the machine. I just needed to know how fast they worked, how much product they could make in one day, and all this information. So there was a lot of communication going into this. Again, through this, I learned a lot about Excel and how to make a low-maintenance spreadsheet. And I learned a lot of how to apply knowledge in different situations, because even though all the capacity models are set up the same, there's differences in each one. So each one still has to be slightly different, and I had to learn how to tweak each one to fit the circumstance that I was in. Printing plates is another project I worked on, and these are the things that stamp the designs onto cups, I guess, to put it simply. All of our Polypro, which is a type of plastic, all of our Polypro cups were, it was a rough situation during the summer. They just didn't have enough, and they were shorting customers, and it was bad. So they were trying really hard to get these plates out so that they could make the product quicker and not be shorting all these customers that they really shouldn't have been shorting. So I was in charge of researching all these plates and making sure that we had them, and if we didn't, then I had to get master data to make them, and then I had to make sure they were extended, and just this whole process. I just had to keep track of all these thousands of plates. But it sounds a lot more complicated than it was. It really wasn't that bad. And then my impact on DART. I think that I provided my team while I was there with some more accurate capacity data. And granted, the general idea of how to set these up was given to me by my manager, but I did add my own little tweaks here and there, and I also got all the mold-based information, which they did not have before. So I think that really helped out that team while I was there. I helped with all the research on the plates to extend all these Polypro products a lot quicker than they would have been. I helped plants that were going live because I had to make a job aid for one of the systems we use called QUIS. It again stands for something in German, I don't know. But it's what the plant uses to look at what they have to produce next. It just gives them a list of products in a certain order. And I had to make a job aid to tell them how to use it, because the ones that were going live had never used it before and didn't know how. So I helped them out with that. I saved them some time and possible confusion. And then I helped Ada and another plant called Urbana get their plates, their printing plates, so that they could fill the MTO, which is made to order. It's where the customer just gives you, I need this many cases of this product, and we make exactly that many cases. So I made it so we could fill those orders a lot quicker. My education also, I think, helped me excel. The certain classes that I wrote there, I think, are the ones that helped me the most. Accounting, probably the only class that I really used Excel in. So that definitely helped me get at least a little familiar with it. Stats and probability helped me learn to keep track of all different types of information and be able to use it properly. Speech, I hated speech, but it helped me step out of my comfort zone. Helped me improve my communication skills, I think. Principles of management helped me learn how the business world works. So that was also very helpful. It was the only knowledge I had, honestly, going into the business world. And then also having a full schedule every semester. I always had 16 credits every semester. I think that was helpful because it helped me learn how to deal with a busy schedule and keep track of everything and have my time management skills honed. And then choir, I guess it didn't really help with anything business-wise, but it helped me learn to just take a minute and just enjoy what I'm doing and not always be so stressed out. So if you have a class like that, great idea. It's wonderful. Any questions?
They may ask questions at the end.
This is the end.
Okay.
So my internship was at MSU Federal Credit Union. I was in the internal audit department, which is part of the accounting group. So my experience as an intern, and what did I spend 27 hours a week doing for 6 months? So I did it throughout the entire summer, and then we happened to work it out through my class schedule. Then I was able to do it also during the fall by going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and having all my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, to fully sum up all the different projects I was a part of would be impossible. One of the main things they said during the interview when they were hiring me was, "Are you good at multitasking?" I was like, yes, yeah. They were not joking. I was working on average 4 to 5 projects at any given moment. And then I also had to be flexible to jump in new projects when new things came up. So these are just the overall types that I was a part of. So we did compliance and operational audits. Compliance audits are basically going through the different departments that we have and making sure that the credit union is fully in compliance with all the federal laws and regulations and all that. So I definitely got well acquainted with research and making sure that I got the right information. Operational audits were going to all the different branches and making sure that they're running as effectively as they should be and that they're following all the credit union policies. So thankfully, with the operational audits, I was able to go to basically all over Lower Michigan. I was able to go to about 10 different branches throughout the 6 months that I was there, which was really fascinating because every branch runs a little differently. They all have their own unique sets and skills. So that was definitely interesting. And then during the operational audits, one of the main ones that I was a part of were different cash counts, where basically we went to each branch and we spent a full day there just counting all the cash that they had in their location, which takes a long time when you're at a very large bank. Then the 2 projects that I was most in charge of that I kind of headed up was record retention and trust programs. So record retention was basically going through all their files, making sure that they had all of the different information that they were required by law to keep for a certain amount of time, and then also by MSU procedures. Again, a lot of research, a lot of reading old documents and helping get everything organized. And then trust programs, there came up this last fall a major kind of adjustment in one of the regulations. So we had to go back through all of the trusts that they have to make sure that everything was in compliance, which that project was still happening by the time I left. We have been working on it for about 4 months. So that was quite the procedure, but it definitely taught me a lot for learning how to head up a project and how to make sure that everything was getting done. And then the last major thing that we were doing is training days. And when I got hired, they said, specifically, they were like, you're not going to be the intern who's like going to get coffee. That's not going to be your job. You're going to be doing the work of an actual auditor. You're going to be doing all of the jobs that the rest of the team is doing who work here full time. So, along with that, they said, in addition, whenever we have training days that interest you, we'll sponsor you to go to these different training events. So there were a couple, I think 3 in total that I went to that were full day training on different auditing procedures and new up and coming things in the industry. So what I did on a day-to-day basis, there were lots of meetings. I met with all the team members. I met with some of the department heads. Whenever we did cash counts, I was responsible for reporting back to all of the management on how it all went. Also being able to keep track of, because we had so many different projects happening, I had to constantly be keeping track of the status of all the different projects and being able to report at any given moment. If my boss comes swinging by my cubicle and says, by the way, how's that project going? I need to be able to tell him, oh, well, we're at this step, this is what we have left to do, this is what's been done, and here's where the reports are at currently. And then we had to do a lot of testing, much like Oceana, lots of Excel. That's the one thing that I definitely was very thankful for, was being told early on in actuarial science of, you'll want to know Excel, and along with accounting of, that's going to be your life, you'll need to get a hold of it. And it also, I got to work with a couple different software types when I was there, which was good experience. And then while I was there, there were 2 different auditing interns that also circulated through that I got to work with. So we always sat in cubicles right next to each other, and it was always a constant turning, what are you working on? Where are you at? Do you need help? If I need help, we were always in collaboration with each other, which was good. And then with the different full-time auditors, they could also swing by our cubicle at any moment and say, do you have time to do this, this, and this? So it always gave me new experiences. My daily life was never predictable. I went in there anticipating anything and everything to happen. So the main takeaways from this internship specifically was applying to any and all opportunities that came up. My mother actually works for MSUFCU, and she was the one who had mentioned that they had this internship available. And I was kind of like, okay, well, I guess I need one, not necessarily what I was looking to do, but, I might as well apply for it. And I ended up actually overwhelmingly enjoying this experience. It was definitely helped guide where I never thought I would go into auditing, and went into it not even knowing what auditing was. I walked away really enjoying it. So any and all opportunities, definitely going to be looking for those in the future. Getting involved in utilizing available resources. At the credit union, they had said, there are X number of these different resources that you can use. And at first I was a shy person. I was like, no, I'll figure it out. Like, I don't need your help, I can do this. And then eventually at the end of the internship, it was every day going to my boss being like, okay, how do I do this? Like, what resources do I have to make this a little bit easier? Because we were on constant needing to pump out these projects. So definitely utilizing any resources that you're given. My main thing when I walked into the internship was, I told them, I was like, I don't really care what I'm going to be doing. I said it a lot nicer than that. But I kind of walked in saying, I don't really care what you're going to want me to do, so long as I'm just learning. I was like, this internship is for me to learn about the industry and be able to learn new skills and all that. And by me saying that, he was able to get me involved in so many more projects than he would have with the other interns, just because he was like, oh, you want to learn a new thing? Follow me this way. So, and then being patient and asking questions. This was not a super high stress job, but you definitely needed to be able to keep track of your projects and your time. So it was very stressful at some points. So I definitely had to learn to be patient. And then because I didn't know a lot, I had to be willing to ask questions or I wasn't going to survive this internship. So I just had to realize that like they know a lot more than I do, and they realize that, and they're here to answer my questions. So the benefits of working at this specific internship I kind of listed here. They definitely gave me a lot of experience with different technologies. They use a lot of different softwares. by the time I left, there were 4 or 5 different websites that they use that I got adjusted to using, which was very helpful. There were a lot of me sampling and testing data, so pulling raw data and making it into a concise sample, making sure it hits on every point it needed to. So there was a lot of experience with being able to pull and test raw data. The nice thing about this company is that I was treated as if I was a full auditor, as if I had the qualifications, which definitely gave me the confidence and allowed me to get more experience. It definitely allowed me to make professional connections, which is kind of the next 2 or 3 points as well. I was able to meet with the CFO, Chief Financial Officer. I met with the CEO. I was able to do shadowing in different departments. We met with risk management, which we work closely with as the auditing team. I work with accounting, with the HR group. So the nice thing about this one is it's a very diverse internship. You'll learn a lot. They sponsored me to attend different trainings and events, as I had mentioned before. And then it was just very well compensated through different wages, matching for retirement, and sponsoring to these different events that I had mentioned before. So personal applications and kind of going forward, what am I going to do with all the information I learned? So my suggestion for getting an internship, as someone who got to the game a little later than anticipated, because I only have 1 more year till I graduated when I did this internship. And kind of the second point there is to start early and apply to as many different opportunities as you can and do as many as possible. The other interns I was working with, they had told me, they're like, oh yeah, this is my 3rd internship. I have another one lined up for next semester. And I'm like, oh good. I'm behind the game on that one. So definitely getting as many internships as possible because they're far more beneficial than I anticipated them being. I knew that I was going to learn a lot. I didn't realize how much and how diverse of knowledge they would share with me. And then the first point there of utilizing SAU's resources. They have a lot of resources that I didn't necessarily realize when I was first starting, such as working with the career group to help edit and design my resume, which I did with them, which definitely helped me get the position I got, as well as different professors and department heads and all that. They have connections as well. So if you're looking for something, don't be afraid to reach out to different connections that you have here, because there's a good chance that they have connections for you out in the real world. Also, student alumni. I know a lot of my friends have gotten internships through that, and also career fairs are extremely beneficial. You meet a lot of people. It's a fantastic opportunity for networking. Okay, so how I got this specific internship, so I'm not sure how many of you are accounting majors or would be interested in this kind of internship, but if you are, if you just go to their website, it's similar times as other internships. Late winter, early spring is when they're hiring. And then if you have any questions, like going forward, if you're like, actually this is a really interesting internship, my email is just paige.bell@arbor.edu. You can get a hold of me at any time. So this is advice that I wish I knew prior to going into my internship. Being open and honest about my questions and capabilities. Definitely when they said, are you good at multitasking? I was a little unsure about that because I didn't realize how qualified I needed to be in the multitasking sphere. But it definitely pushed me to be better than I was, which was a fantastic opportunity because in the industry that I'm going into with the business realm and accounting and actuarial science, multitasking is about as crucial as it can be. So I definitely appreciate it. And then they definitely took, when I said, I don't know much about this, instead of them being disappointed or whatever, they said, okay, well come over here. This person's really good at it. They'll teach you how to do it. So rather than me smashing my head against the desk because I don't know how to do work with Quest, which is one of the programs they use, instead somebody came over and spent I think it was 5 or 6 hours teaching me how to do Quest and understand the software. So being open and honest about anything, any questions or your capabilities will definitely get you further than just trying to figure it out. Work on getting technical skills to enhance your resume. I wish that I would have spent more time learning different programming languages or working better with Excel. Just if you, obviously you know your field, so kind of just knowing what the industry expects and then working to get those qualifications will put you ahead of the game for after graduation. And then the last thing is getting involved in making connections. When I went in, I was like, I got this job because I said I could sit behind a desk and I didn't have to talk to people. I was like, I can sit here and do my own work and I don't have to rely on anybody else. Could not have been any more wrong. I was constantly in meetings and constantly working in groups. I almost never worked by myself. So, but that definitely pushed me to understand more about the industry and more about my capabilities and what I enjoyed. I didn't think I would enjoy running meetings and a lot of public speaking things. I learned that I actually really enjoyed it through this, which I wasn't anticipating. So definitely getting involved in any ways you can, and then taking those opportunities to do networking. When we met with the CEO, I hardly spoke a word to her because she was very intimidating. But I definitely was able to make connections through this internship. So that's definitely something I wish that I had been able to do more of, and what I would tell myself now looking back. So, as my summary, it's just start early. Many of the people that I was working with had an internship at the end of their freshman year. They said it was never too early. Some of them had internships before they graduated high school. So it's never too early to do an internship. Apply to internships that will push you and strengthen you. I wasn't sure if I would be necessarily qualified for this position. I applied and it worked out beautifully. So applying to internships, even if you don't necessarily think you'll get it, because walking, talking proof of that, I did, even though I didn't think I would. And then work to make those networking connections. They are infinitely more valuable than I was expecting. I mean, just through knowing my mom who worked here, I was able to get this position. So it doesn't necessarily have to be alumni or any heads of departments. Just somebody that you simply know down the road could help you get a job. Utilize all your resources, as I had mentioned before, and then making the most of your undergrad time here through learning skills and hopefully getting an internship. So, if you have any questions, that's my email there. So.
All right, so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Nate Fodrell. I'm a junior actuarial science student. I'm actually done in the fall though, and I'm kind of excited to be done. But so this past summer, I actually worked in an IT department working with a programming language called COBOL at auto owners. So I will get started. So a little bit about the company. They were established just over 100 years ago in Mount Pleasant, and within 5 years they had moved to Lansing, where they're still at. And the picture is of their headquarters. They started with a collection of around $100 in annual premiums when they started, and I mean consider that was in 1916 dollars. That's a little more than what it sounds like, but today they're a Fortune 500 company. In 2016 alone, they collected over $1 billion in new premiums, so business that was with them for the first year. They operate in 26 states technically, but they have some subsidiaries that kind of expand that to closer to 35. And they offer a whole bunch of types of insurance, from auto, obviously from the name auto owners, but they have home or property, life, business, and plenty of others. A couple things they're famous for is that they only work with independent agents. So an independent insurance agent is someone who's not, it's not necessarily an employee of the company that they'll write insurance for. So that basically they have the choice. Basically, they have the choice to work with different insurance companies for their personal customers. And the main thing they're famous for is their claims department. So a lot of insurance companies rightfully get a lot of flack for not wanting to pay claims. But from everything that I've researched and spent time there, auto owners really wants to get you back on your feet after you've suffered a loss. They're really not one to complain about you having a loss. They just want to help you recover from it, because I mean, ultimately that's what you pay for. So this summer I worked in a department called TPP Systems. TPP part stands for Tailored Protection Policy, and that just refers to like complex, I call all-inclusive business policies. So I don't want to say it's their most important customers, but definitely their most valuable premiums every year. I know they've got plenty of policies that collect over $100,000 in premiums every year. And then the systems part just refers to the program development group. So there's a lot of different departments within the company that have the TPP like start of their department name. Like there'll be TPP underwriting or TPP actuarial. The systems just refers to like the people behind the scenes that develop the software. So this is one of the only departments that still works with COBOL. In fact, in the next few years, they're going to start the process of switching over to something that's a little more recent. If I were to guess, I imagine they'll switch to Java, but that's something that hopefully I'll figure out in the next couple of years, assuming that I will still be there. So let me talk a little bit about COBOL. COBOL is just a programming language that's mainly used for business and finance applications. As it says, it's originally designed in 1959, so it's a bit dated. And I mean, although it's had a lot of changes over the years, because it's so old, it's really only used in legacy systems, and it's really only used in companies that are old enough to have been using COBOL and large enough at the time when they started using COBOL that it was hard for them to switch in the 60 years since then. And you'll find it in the government as well, because the government's pretty slow to switch. Another thing that a lot of departments, not only in AO, but probably across the country that use COBOL are having, is that a lot of these programmers that are professional with COBOL are getting to the point of retirement. So like my department, for example, I worked with about 10 people, and I bet you there will be 3 people left working there in the next 5 to 10 years. So they're in the process of having 70% of their department retired in the next 10 years. So that's definitely a problem that they're going to have to overcome soon, which is probably also the reason they're deciding now is the best time to switch to a more modern system. COBOL requires the use of a mainframe or like a simulated mainframe, and that's what this picture on the right is. That is what a mainframe looks like, which is super old school. And when I first started, I didn't really know what to expect until when I saw that this is what I was going to be working with all summer. It was kind of like felt like a joke to me, but and the last important thing about COBOL, which I'll get into when I start talking about my project, is that there are 2 different types of COBOL module, 2 main types of COBOL modules, batch and what they call CICS. The language is pretty much the same. They're both COBOL derivatives. The only problem is they do not work well together, and so for example, batch requires all your files to be offline to be able to use them or to update them, whereas CICS, if your files are offline, you can't look at them, you can't update them, you can't do anything with them. So and then the way you start these modules change. JCL is how you start a batch, and that just stands for Job Control Language, which is a whole another type of programming, which seems kind of ridiculous. You need to know a second programming language to just start your initial program, but it is what it is. And then trans ID or transaction ID is like a 4-character name that refers to a module that you have to type in to start the module. So my project this summer was actually really interesting because this is a project that they've had open for like 7 years that no one had the time to really devote like 3 months to. So my job was to force automatic reprints of policy declarations. So a policy declaration is just basically with the details of your insurance policy. It's the stuff that no one reads. But so the benefit of this was this was to be done so that they could compare their production policies with their test policies to make sure that their testing environment is working properly, or the changes they make in test will appear properly on the production deck. So it should be helpful. Obviously, I haven't been there to be able to use it, but it just took a lot of effort to actually get working, which I'll talk about next. So some of the problems I had, so the department infrastructure is really problematic. Even the people on the team will tell you that TPP is not a fun department to work with. COBOL in general is actually really easy to work with compared to a lot of other languages. It's not object-oriented like Java and a bunch of others. So, and even the sentence structure in COBOL is really simple, and it's almost writes how you would say it, which is a lot easier to figure out than Java. Is very confusing. Like, what you want to say to get something done is not at all how you would have to type it to get it done. So as far as that goes, COBOL was really easy to work with, but the way TPP was set up, the infrastructure provided a lot of problems. So like the policy creation, renewal, update, that set of modules was all in CICS. The department refers to those modules as the online modules. So these modules require like a user interface, so you have to interact, obviously, to create or update these policies, which makes sense because if you want to make a change, you would pull up a policy and manually make the change, which makes sense. But as far as making this module work automatically became a problem. Besides that, the modules that made the declarations were batch, so those were the two types that don't get along. And then the comparison tool, which I had to use, was created by a third party, and it was controlled by a different department. So like to get stuff done as far as the comparison tool, I had to plead with a different department that my job was very important, so that they would get it done. So I really had no control over that part. As I said, the online modules require manual interaction to work. So I had to trick the system into thinking that somebody keyed in a manual reprint for 1,000 policies a night, when really it happened when no one was at the office. And then because I was testing, I was comparing production and a test environment, I had to work around limits on production, which limits on production is good because you don't want to accidentally change production and have a whole problem with actual policies that are being paid. But it just made it a lot more difficult for me to work around. And then I had a limited time. I only had 11 weeks to work because soccer has a very, very short summer. And by the time I was done with training, I had like 7 weeks to work on my project. And I was working on something that nobody in my department really knew how to do. So those were some of my worries and problems that I came across over the summer. So here's my solution, and if you get confused, that's okay. I wrote this stuff, like I did this stuff 6 months ago, so I'm still kind of confused. I'm not exactly sure how I got to work in the first place, being honest, but so I split it up into 2 streams of modules that would basically start one after the other. So the first set would happen overnight when a lot of the company's processing happened. So my stuff kicked in at around 2 in the morning every night. So what that stream did is it would basically take a random selection of policies that were either written new or renewed that processed that same night. So those policies would process at like midnight, and then my first module would take a random selection about 2 hours later from those set policies, and I had to copy those down into a different file. Then I would also take the production decks from my randomly selected policies, copy them down to another different file. And then the last thing that happened overnight was all of the policies that were randomly selected were copied into the test environment, so they existed in the production environment and the test environment, so you could do the comparison. Then in the morning, that first stuff was really easy to write. It was just figuring out what time was best to get that stuff to run was the tricky part. The second stuff that I wrote was a lot more difficult because I had to work around a lot of the infrastructure problems. So I had to ask for access to a special type of module that will kick off a CICS module through a batch program, which is like there's a reason that you have to get special access to use them, because they're almost impossible to debug and they take up a lot of space and a bunch of other problems. But this second set would kick off right in the morning when all the files became online again, which is around 6 a.m.-ish. But the first module would link to the online modules to trick the system into thinking I manually keyed in a reprint for my first policy. So like, these online modules are like, some of them are like 500,000 lines of code long, and there's probably 50 of them that were important to me. So like 2 weeks of my project was just trying to figure out how these things worked, and Control F on a notepad was my best friend for a while. But basically I just linked to the modules, made them think I manually keyed a reprint, so the reprint would, in the test environment, would go to the test environment's declaration file. I would copy that policy's deck to my own file, and then I had to delete the policy deck from the official file, and then delete the policy out of the environment. The user is just the test environment. I had to delete the policy out of the entire environment so that it didn't get full, because they have limited space for a testing environment, and I was processing like 1,000 to 1,500 policies every night. And then that last part is just NFM plans are basically Windows operations that you can command through COBOL. It's pretty complicated, but that's essentially just moves files on your computer around while staying in COBOL. So I had to, and that I also had to set up with the other department that didn't really care about my project because I was an intern. So those plans just moved the files that I had around, started the reprint, making my COBOL file into a PDF, and then send those PDFs into the comparison tool, which they actually didn't get done before I left, but I did have my stuff working, which was good. I think if I would have had a week or two more to work, I probably would have been able to get everything functioning as it's supposed to be, but once the other department had their stuff up, it probably would have taken like 10 minutes to finish everything. So if you're confused about that, it's fine. It took me 4 weeks just to learn like basic COBOL, and then from there I had to continue to learn and teach myself how to do everything. And it got to like, once I was done with my project, no one in my department knew how to do it. So, and these are 10 people who probably have collective COBOL programming experience of like 250 years would be my guess. So if I trick them, then you're probably pretty lost, so that's fine. I'll just close with some tips that I have. So just realize if you're going to do an internship, it's kind of this combination between having knowledge and skill versus just having potential. As a couple people have said already, classes might not explicitly prepare you for your internship. Like, no class here taught me how to program in COBOL, but I built some good potential and problem-solving skills through a bunch of different classes I had. And ultimately, that's what's most important, is having problem-solving skills and being able to apply your knowledge when it matters. I always hear this saying where people say, I learned more in my first 3 days on the job than I learned my entire 4 years in college. Well, only reason it feels that way is because the 3 days you're learning on the job is stuff that you're going to apply instantly, whereas the stuff you learn over 4 years is just helping you prepare for being able to learn that quickly. Like for me, I didn't even apply for a programming position. I had no COBOL experience. I've worked with Java for like 2 semesters. So I went from having no experience, no knowledge, and now I was able to figure something out that a bunch of professionals couldn't, and I got rehired for next summer. And I was actually the first intern rehired in their department ever, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
Some other things, as have already been said, apply early. For me, I applied in September. I didn't have an interview for the place I ended up working at until December, which is probably pretty normal. But the longer you wait, the greater the chance that positions that you could fill are already filled, or the greater the chance your potential employer is like, well, they waited until now, so maybe they're not that interested. Also, just fill out applications for a ton of places. I applied at 5 places, was instantly rejected by 2, never heard back from 2 more, and then the one I got accepted from was not actually what I applied for. They thought I would work well for their company, so they're like, hey, you want to do this because we think you might be good at it? And I was like, sure. I mean, I also had some help because the president of the HR department at Auto Owners is my next door neighbor, so I think he could have worked for me. So that probably helped. I don't know if he even knew I was applying, but I'm just going to pretend he did me a solid. Also, don't get discouraged if you have applications that are instantly rejected. This is what I hate about stuff now. Companies basically will have put in algorithms that will read your resume, and if they don't see a selection of words, they just throw you out automatically. So like if you get instantly rejected, that doesn't mean you're not qualified or you wouldn't be good at the job. It's just because they decided that they didn't want to have people scan over every single resume they get, so you just got booted by the AI that read your resume. Just from my experience, just be willing to switch or at least do something you're uncomfortable with. I applied for an actuarial job and ended up working in IT, and now I'm working next summer in IT, and I'm hoping to do a full-time job in IT. So you never know. I think every single one of us that spoke today did not expect to work where we worked, and we all enjoyed it. So I mean, if that doesn't show you that maybe switching is not the worst thing that can happen to you, I don't know. And then similarly, just use it as an opportunity to judge how much you enjoy specialization. So I imagine a lot of you will be going to grad school, since this is supposed to be like a natural science seminar. I would encourage you to shadow or do an internship before you go into grad school to make sure it's something that you enjoy. Not saying the entire major, I don't want you to go in and be like, wow, I made the wrong choice in my major. It's just do I want to be an OT versus a PT or something like that? Do shadowing to decide on your specialization. It'll help. I mean, I discovered an interest in IT, and I had 0 experience in that before. So that is it. Does anybody have any questions for any of us? Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand this. You were part of a department where they had 250 years of experience. They had worked for 7 years to solve a problem. They couldn't solve it. You came in 7 weeks and you fixed it.
Well,
Way to go.
okay. I mean, no one in particular was working on it like all the time. So I had a training mentor, a project mentor. My project mentor was the one who had been asked to fix it. Well, like basically create this like 5 to 7 years ago. But the problem was, one, they didn't know how. 2, they do like 3 or 4 projects at a time, whereas this was the only thing I was doing all summer until I was finished. And like much more important stuff would come up every time he would get started. So that like the PDF creation tool I was talking about, like my project mentor was working on my project, and then they asked him to do that instead, and that took him like 12. Yeah, it took him like a year plus to get working. So like, yes, they had a lot of experience, but no one was in particular trying to figure out.
Yeah, but you did it. Nice job.
Yeah, I did figure out how to do it. Well, I hope. I haven't been there. I haven't gotten any emails that told me I like broke their system or something. They haven't like rescinded my job offer, so that's pretty good. Yeah.
And then questions for Oceana and Paige also, as well as Nate. I had a question for Oceana. You know, given all of this emphasis on recycling and renewable stuff, is DART working on that?
Actually, yes. They have a drive-through recycling center on campus that all the employees can use. Anyone in the community can come use it. They also, what is it? They told me in the summer, so this is not exactly a year ago, but in the summer they said over the past year they had recycled 1 million pounds of foam, which when you realize how light foam is, like that's a lot. They also, New York City decided to ban foam, and while they were still deciding like, are they going to allow them to ban it, are they not, they came to an agreement. DART said, if we meet this and this and this, like these things, will you reconsider? And they said, yeah, we won't ban it if you can do these things. And so in the meantime, while they were trying to do that, DART actually hired people from their own company to drive around New York City and collect foam that people were allowed to put out by their waste baskets. And they collected it all and they went and recycled it. And eventually they did meet those requirements, and New York City still banned it, and so yeah, they actually sued them. I don't think they won, but they did sue them. But yeah, they have a huge emphasis on recycling everything. Like they don't have trash cans in the building. There is, but you have to walk like to one specific area on the floor to go get it.
I see.
So everything is recycled.
Everything's recycled. Other questions for our speakers? Well, thank you all for coming, and let's give a big